All right, Jack, we had a few stories that we wanted to take a little bit of a closer look at because they all kind of revolve around a theme about AI safety. So we're calling this our AI safety roundup. The first one is a story that we kind of picked apart, if you want to call it that, earlier on the rundown, and that's from our good old friends at Microsoft. They've announced a significant overhaul of that controversial AI powered recall feature. Now, you may remember that it was kind of one of those things that allowed you to record stuff that was going on your PC. And the innocent reasoning behind it was, oh, if you ever make a mistake or you forget what you were doing, you could go back and figure things out. Well, a lot of people didn't like that. And there were huge privacy concerns, right? Somebody can go back and dig things out. Well, they responded to those concerns by implementing full encryption, virtualization based security, and Windows Hello authentication for the feature, especially the ones that are taking screenshots of user activity. It also includes the ability to completely uninstall recall. Yay! Of course, that is at odds with the approach that they're taking to integrating AI capabilities deeply into Windows, as the investors are clamoring for, because AI is the new oil. And that means that they're going to be prioritizing things like user control and data protection and giving the control of this back to the users. So, Jack, I'm going to let you jump in here because you're a big security and privacy advocate. Is Microsoft going far enough with recall to say definitively that we've slayed this beast?
Yes, I think they are actually, and I find it's surprising. I find myself saying that. So the I think there's a couple of things that are very important here. First is moving it from a mandatory to an opt-in experience, and the second is making sure you can when you uninstall it that it removes everything from the system. So that's really big on the privacy concern. The other thing they've done, which I think is really key and important, is the database that stores all of the AI data, your screenshots and whatever else it captures, is protected by your TPM, your trusted platform module, which means that only you can authorize anybody to get to it. Even if someone who has an administrator rights on the PC can't get to that database and can't decrypt it to get access to the contents without you being there and somehow physically being present and authorizing it with your PIN, your face, or your fingerprints. So I think that's really key from the privacy concerns. Um, Now, the other part of this that I think people sometimes forget is these types of features have been around for many years and they've been incorporated into insider threat security tools. So there are a number of tools, whether it's a specific insider threat tool or a corporate CASB cloud access security broker tool or other tools that will record user actions when they're going to a corporate website or corporate or for developers accessing corporate infrastructure. So the tools themselves have been around a long time. It's simply that this type of tool has been included as part of the operating system from Microsoft. But from a security and privacy perspective, that you're giving the user total control over this, I think is very important and key. The other thing I think is Microsoft is really there's a big push here that these are all tied towards Microsoft's Copilot Plus PC. So it's really a move to get users to buy a new PC. So it's being pushed not only by Microsoft but by all the hardware developers.
So the first thing I will say is this is what Microsoft should have done 3 years ago when they released Windows 11. They should have tied features directly to the TPM because TPM is required to install Windows 11. So spoiler alert out there, guys, you can't get this with Windows 10. And I know a lot of you were looking at doing that. I love the fact that you can rip the whole thing out. Listen, I'm running the beta for Apple Intelligence on my laptop right now, or my iPad right now. It needs some polish. They all do. So far, nothing's given me pause, but I'm also not worried because I've seen the documentation of what Apple's doing with Apple Intelligence and how much of it's on device versus being, somewhere else, and what I have control over and what I can see and what I can tweak and tune and all that other stuff. But I think that the last point that you made is kind of critical, and it's not a positive critical. The reason why they want everybody to go out and buy these new Copilot Plus PCs is because they have those NPUs in them. And if you don't have Copilot installed, do you really need an NPU? I don't think it's massively increased the MSRP of these laptops because they have extra hardware in there, But I also worry that the reason why they weren't massively increased was the same reason that you can't buy a non-smart TV anymore, is because basically the people who are putting the smart features in there are underwriting this. And I wondered, oh, well, how much access are we going to get to the Copilot data that we've collected? I would hope the answer is none, but I'm also a security nerd, and I know that the answer is probably not that. So we'll see if Microsoft neutering recall to appeal to a privacy conscious group of people out there is actually going to sink their efforts to sell more Copilot PCs. I hope not.
Well, I hope not too, but I really think that what we don't know right now is really how useful the recall feature is going to be. And that's really what's going to drive adoption more than anything else. And because recall is designed to be more useful over time as it learns more and more about you and your behaviors, we won't really know the true utility for months, if not years. So I think the next sort of safety topic, AI safety topic we want to talk about was California Governor Gavin Newsom vetoed California Senate Bill 1047 this week. And this bill was aimed at regulating AI models and forcing developers to impose safety and kill switches. And Newsom stated the reason behind the veto is the specifics behind the size of the model would be subject to scrutiny. The model really, the size limits were based on the amount of dollars used to create the model, and it was something like 100 million. So that really was only a few of the very large models, and a lot of the smaller models wouldn't be subject to it. So he said that basically some of the smaller models could be more harmful as a result because they wouldn't be subject to this. There were proponents on both sides of the aisle supporting and defending this, and it's really the AI aisle, not the Republican Democrat aisle. But so what's really the issue here? And is the regulation crucial, or does it go far enough, or doesn't it go far enough, Tom?
It doesn't go far enough. And I'll tell you why, is because when you end up getting into a point where you have to compromise on these things, you have to draw a line somewhere, right? And Newsom, or at least the sponsors of the bill, thought that the line to draw was north of this, dollar amount, right? Well, like you said, there aren't a whole lot of models out there that are north of that dollar amount. It just so happens that the ones that are the companies that everybody is so concerned about, like OpenAI and Google and other ones. But there's nothing to say that I can't game the system, right? So let's say the line's $100 million. Okay. So I drop off and I say, I'm going to create this new OpenAI model. We'll call it not evil AI. As long as I only put $90 million worth of research into not evil AI, I'm not subject to any of that stuff. And if it looks like I'm about to go over, I fork that model and recreate it again, starting from zero, so that all of my models are iterative. I'm still getting the same results in different projects, only now they're under the threshold for reporting. And then you're going to have someone go, oh, well, we got to lower the threshold. So they take it down to, I don't know, $50 million. Well, now when the project gets to $45 million, I just fork it again. Do you see how when you draw a line in the sand, you're always going to have people who are dancing on either side of that line, right? The problem isn't tagging things. The problem is you've got to look at what's going on. You have to have more comprehensive regulation, and you're going to have to pick a different way to do it. And here's the problem. You're going to have people who are going to get really furious at you that you're trying to stifle their competition and censor them. And yes, that's exactly what we're doing. Because, and this is one of my favorite talking points recently, what is the point of a corporation? It is to make money. Yeah, throw all the nonprofit crap out the window, which is what we're going to talk about here in a minute. The purpose of a company is to make money and not break the law, because breaking the law leads to fines and all kinds of other stuff, which means you make less money. It does not say anything about taking care of the workers, bettering society, or, keeping people from getting chopped up in sausage making machines. That's things that we have had to add protections in to prevent things from, like, I don't know, catching the Cuyahoga River on fire because it's cheaper to dump chemicals in it than it is to have them sent somewhere else. We have to have good regulation on this. And this is an emerging area that we know very little about. Even the experts in the field don't know a whole lot about it. So how can you regulate it? Well, you're going to have to do research. You're going to have to take a few shots at this law and get it right over time. The problem is, We're also facing an election year here in the US. And so people needed to feel like they had to get something out there to say that they were looking at the problem. But when you rush legislation out to appease the vocal minority, whoever they happen to be, you're going to get it wrong every time. Mark my words. What you've got to do is you got to take a more measured approach and make sure you're getting everything. Because anybody who's ever played online games know as soon as you make a rule, there's going to be a group of people that are going to try to exploit right up to that rule and then claim, well, it wasn't against the rule. Why did you ban me from doing this? And I think that that's what we're kind of getting into now. It's the whole, like if this car weighs 5,000 pounds less, then it's technically not classified as a light truck. So it doesn't have to meet these certain MPG guidelines. And if you wanted to know why every pickup truck on the road is so friggin' enormous now, it literally is to beat MPG requirements. So, Jack, I mean, am I off base here? Or should we have passed this bill and just said, YOLO, deal with the consequences?
No, I don't think you're off base, and this is always the challenge with regulation is, or I should say, high tech regulation is high tech moves at a pace that is much faster, orders of magnitude faster than government, and governments and regulators are always behind the curve and chasing their tails, trying to figure out how to regulate something that's moving so quickly. And as you said, there's also always the opportunity to game the system. So I think the legislature needs to basically say, we understand that. Let's take a moment, do our research, and say, how can we craft a regulation that protects everybody while not stifling innovation and not just making it so that it's so obvious about how to work around the regulations to get what we want, which is more money.
All right. Well, I alluded to it, but you remember that great OpenAI power struggle? Man, it seems like it was forever ago. I looked it up. It was actually November of last year. It was 11 months. I guess it's time for another one. In this particular case, CTO Mira Murati, Research VP Barrett Zoff, and Chief Research Officer Bob McGrew all announced that they were leaving basically at the same time. You may wonder, man, when executives bail out on a company, what's happening? Well, we saw a story coming in from Reuters that said that OpenAI is potentially going to restructure the company away from that nonprofit focus and look more like a startup that would consolidate a whole lot of power in CEO Sam Altman. Oh, you remember Sam Altman, the guy that got fired in that power struggle back in November because people feared that he was taking the company in the wrong direction. And then, of course, he managed to stage a reverse coup and get all of his unfriendly people unseated from the board and took back over. And yeah, we never talked about that again, right? I mean, where do we even start unpacking this whole thing? You've got three major high profile people in the company that all announced they're all leaving within like a day of each other. You've got a news story coming out saying you're trying to consolidate power. Man, if this was like 17th century Europe, I would expect a Spanish armada to come sailing out of San Francisco Bay anytime soon.
Well, that's an interesting analogy, and I think it's actually a very apt analogy because really there's two things going on here. One is we are discovering the new world of AI, and two, as you talked about in our previous segment, there's a tremendous amount of money involved. And I mean, let's be real, this is real money that is unheard of back for startups in any other environment. We're talking about funding rounds of hundreds of millions to billions of dollars as opposed to $5 to $10 million funding or 20 or $30 million funding rounds. So I think people are looking at this from inside and outside OpenAI and outside in the rest of the AI world and saying, there's all this money floating around. I need to grab a piece of that cash before it disappears. Now, if you look at let's talk about people first and then the company. If you think about the people first, how much salary can they get by being part of a nonprofit such as OpenAI? It's clear that people think that they can go in the open market, just like a professional sports player, and in open bidding get a lot more money. And I think that's probably behind the motivations. They may speak and wave their hands around the mission and various other concerns, but the amount of money that's floating around in AI is truly stunning. I think the second thing is when you look at, again, when you look at the company in OpenAI and what OpenAI wants to do, what they really want to do, they can only do by being a public company, a for-profit company rather than a non-for-profit. And they're talking about needing investments in the hundreds of billions of dollars because they want to invest billions of dollars in just in data centers alone to support all of the models that they're building. When you look at all this money swimming around, like I said, who wouldn't want a piece of that? And I don't see this stopping anytime soon.
No, and I'll be honest here. I'm prognosticating and getting on my little soapbox a little bit. This has never been about whether or not OpenAI is a nonprofit. I mean, realistically speaking, they haven't been a nonprofit for years because they've always been focused on making money. But being a nonprofit gives them a shield whenever they're losing money hand over fist because nobody cares about AI. And it was great when you could talk about all the philanthropic work you're doing and deduct it off of your taxes and all this other stuff. And then a funny thing happened. Everybody wanted AI all of a sudden, and the genie was out of the bottle. And now there's billions, if not trillions of dollars floating around out there that people are literally willing to sink into anything. It's the Beanie Babies craze all over again. I don't care if it says Bernie Babies. It looks like a Beanie Baby, and I'm going to buy into it. But then Altman ran into a problem. I'm a nonprofit. I can't make money. And so now he's going to have to transform the company because that pretty little shield is now a wall keeping him from being the next Jensen Huang. So what is ultimately going to happen is they are going to have to transform the company. But when you hired a whole bunch of people on the premise that you were going to be doing nonprofit good works using AI for all these other things, that money grab looks a little bad. And I will admit, you're absolutely right. It's, the scene in Beverly Hills Cop. It's like, in this one hand, I've got all of my outrage at the fact that the company is doing bad things, and I want to go somewhere else. What if I gave you something in this hand that would make you forget about what's in this hand? Say, like, I don't know, like $15 million a year. I forgot all about my outrage. AI is totally fine, however we want to use it. What I would say is if you want to make a stand against Sam Altman and his plans to do whatever he's going to do with AI, make another nonprofit foundation, take a small salary, and fight against it, create better regulation, work on ways to hamstring what he's doing, not how he's doing it. Because as we learned last November, while he may have detractors inside of the company, he has powerful friends that will do whatever it takes to make sure his vision is executed. And if that makes him sound like the Emperor from Star Wars, you're not far off. And that's the problem that we're dealing with here is there's only so many people inside of a company that can stand up and do this. And the worst part is the people who are quitting in droves are the executives who have no real power to impact this. Who are the ones who are still there doing the work? The people who are writing the code and creating iterations to make more money. And I'm sure that they are incentivized to do that. But if the people who are doing the day-to-day work all suddenly up and left OpenAI because they were protesting what Sam was doing, I promise you he'd change his tune really fast. When the money hose gets turned off, suddenly you don't make it so well anymore.